Hello, everyone, and welcome to One Control Port Podcast, episode 253. I'm Benjamin Yoder, here today, talking about video games. It's going to be a little bit of a weird episode this week, because I have a lot of things to talk about that usually don't fall into what we discuss, I feel like, or at least I feel that way. Also, there's no news I want to talk about this week. There's one particular story we'll get into, but it's not really relevant to most people, probably. Not that has held me back before on this podcast. The Kingdom Hearts 4 is maybe the most biggest announcement more recently, but I have nothing to really say about Kingdom Hearts at this point unless they really show me something that, changes my mind on the series. Kind of the big thing with Kingdom Hearts 4 was the reveal that it's in a modern day Tokyo looking place kind of thing, which was something that was implied in Kingdom Hearts 3 as far as I understand, having not played it. Yeah, and just the trailer they showed is just one of those games trailers where it's pretty clearly not really active gameplay. It's not representative of the moment to moment gameplay you're going to have. It's just here's this kind of scripted event that's happening where Sora's jumping up a bunch of buildings and hey, if that's a free form thing you can do in Kingdom Hearts 4, I'm cool, very cool, but I'm not convinced at this point. So, it reminds me a lot of the Final Fantasy 15 Leviathan scene, when they showed that off, when they renamed Final Fantasy 13 Versus to 15. That E3 trailer, if you look at what that thing is compared to what was in the final game, they are not representative of that. That trailer is not really representative of what happens in the game itself. So that doesn't mean that people shouldn't be excited though. So very cool on that. I just have no personal interest. So we did go ahead and beat back Pac-Man World 2 though. We finished that up on stream. Just to get kind of the more normal stuff out of the way here real quick. And Pac-Man World 2, I can't say I loved it, but I think it was better than I expected it to be. It is from that era of kind of collectathon platformers where I don't really expect much out of it. And I think the big thing that really I took away from Pac-Man World 2 was the moveset for Pac-Man was pretty interesting. You have this ability to bounce as a ball, to kind of rapidly bounce through the environment, and it's kind of an attack kind of thing. And then you also have this charge up run, which you can use. That's kind of a Sonic spin dash, and it's just kind of an interesting moveset for Pac-Man. Does it really fit the environment? I think at times it can be a little not conducive to how narrow some of the areas in the game are. But I think it was still really fun to play overall. And for how long it was, I think we beat it in 2 streams, and it was probably 2.5 to 3 hours for the first stream, then another 40-ish minutes to an hour for the next stream. So, something you can sit down and play through in an afternoon if you just want to beat it, right? There's the collectathon aspect of it, but I'm good. I'll pass on that. I did actually look at Pac-Man Versus because I have the compilation disc. It's Pac-Man World. It's compilation package. It's a box with 2 discs in it. One with Pac-Man Versus, one with Pac-Man World 2. And I was is Pac-Man Versus something I can actually do anything with? But as far as I can tell, it is solely multiplayer focused. If you don't know what Pac-Man Versus is, this is that game where you had the Game Boy Advance connected to the GameCube, and then all the other players would be using GameCube controllers. So the person on the Game Boy Advance would play as Pac-Man, going around, and they have a very traditional Pac-Man style NES or 2D maze on their actual GPA. I'm pretty sure it pretty much replicates the arcade experience for that. And then on the GameCube and on the TV, you have 3 people playing as the ghosts, and they have limited views to kind of move around. So I've never played it, and maybe someday I will. It's just I do not do a lot of local multiplayer in my life, so getting 3 people together to do that with me is kind of a whole other thing. But I think there are CPU ghosts. So I guess if you were desperate enough for single player, you probably could do a slightly handicapped version of it where you launch the Game Boy Advance and play on the Game Boy Advance and have one player be a GameCube controller and then have the other CPU ghosts just kind of floating around. Unless the player has to do something to make those ghosts move in some way, you could just have basically one ghost be sitting out while you play Pac-Man kind of thing. So potentially there's something there. It seems like there's a handful of levels as well, so I don't know. Maybe someday I'll force some people to play with it or play with me for Pac-Man World or Pac-Man Versus, but I just don't really see it happening. So I just marked it as null on my backloggery and then went and put it under the bed. If you don't know, any game I beat that's from a previous console generation, I have these drawers on my bed and I put it under there. It's not a great long-term solution. I'm honestly running out of space in both of them right now. 2 drawers that I do this with. So I need to figure out something, and that's part of why I actually keep most modern consoles. Also, this is true for like the Xbox. But like some systems, I keep the whole collection out here. Some of them I like put beat ones away, kind of thing. So it's just a way for me to like try to reduce the amount of games that are like actively on my shelf while still keeping them like accessible, kind of thing. So Pac-Man World 2 was pretty fun. I'm glad we played through it. It was definitely a good like short stream game, I think, for that. But do you need to play Pac-Man World 2? I would say most people in this world could go through their life not having played Pac-Man World 2. Pack and Roll, though, you gotta play the Pack and Roll, man. You have to. No, it's okay. You don't have to play Pack and Roll. And that, and like Pack and Roll on DS is where it's at. So unless you're gonna get the DS version of Pack and Roll, why even bother, man? Why bother? No, it's fine. Pack and Roll Remix was okay. It just doesn't really play quite as well, and it creates a lot of problems with you getting through the environment. I said at one point I was going to do a Pack and Roll like video thing on those two versions of the game. I probably should still do that, especially with Pack and Roll being re-released yet again. I forget when, but it's in that like Pac-Man collection that's coming out fairly soon. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. I'm kind of what I'm doing next is kind of up in the air, and I don't particularly feel like a strong need to do a lot of Pac-Man related content, to be honest with you. So one thing I did spend a lot of time with this weekend, and we'll get into why in a little bit. I'll talk about the game first, though, is Chocobo GP. I decided to go ahead and play that. If you didn't know, there's only a digital version of that here in the US and maybe in Europe as well. But in Japan, there was a physical release, so I went ahead and imported that from PlayAsia. Took a while to get here, but it did get here. And I decided to sit down and play it. And, while I was waiting for this game to get here, I definitely heard a lot about like Battle Pass and all that stuff. And I'll see if I can talk a little bit about that. I may still do a Chocobo GP video. I'm really still on the fence about it for a lot of reasons, but I thought the game itself was like really fun though. So if you don't know, this is like I guess you could say kind of Mario Kart clone. It feels a lot closer to like Mario Kart than say like a Sonic Riders, right? So it does very heavily rely on drift mechanics. You have items you're picking up in the environment, things like that. And kind of the key differences between this and like a Mario Kart is A, it's Final Fantasy, right? And B, you have a Magicite system for the items you pick up on the course. So you'll pick up an item, you get like fire, right? But then you can go and you can pick up an egg, which is like the egg is like the item box thing. So you can pick up an egg of the same color and it'll level up that spell in your inventory. So we become like a fire spell, level 2 fire essentially. And if you go and pick up another red egg, then it becomes a Firaga. So it's like a more powerful version of that spell. So it creates some interesting dynamic with like, knowing when you want to use certain spells and at what level, because the level 1 ones are definitely useful, but they can be a lot more challenging to use because you have to like be accurate with them. Like the fire spell just fires straight forward, kind of like a green shell in some ways, but it doesn't like ricochet off a wall, so you kind of have one shot and that's it. So there's a lot of different spells in the game with fire. There's ice, water, thunder, all those kind of things, and they all have like different effects. Like the thunder one, if there's the player you hit gets like a tag on them, and then if there's anyone around them for a specific period of time, everybody within that range around them will get hit. So if you like throw a thunder into a group of people and they all kind of stick around with each other, eventually that thunder will hit everybody in the group, kind of thing. So there's like a lot of interesting uses for the spells. You can also get different effects by throwing them backwards too. So it's not just always just you throw something backwards and it travels in a straight line behind you, kind of thing. It seems like sometimes their behavior changes depending on what you do with them. But yeah, so it's like a really interesting system because you do have to make a lot of decisions about, am I going to use this now? Am I going to wait till this powers up? Do I want to, take the time to level this up in my inventory and forfeit the ability to get other abilities? And what's really important depending on what position I'm in right now, right? So there's a lot of like really interesting decisions you have to make about the magic system. It also means there's a lot more flexibility, I feel like, in the ability to do like defensive spells, because you have 3 Magicite slots essentially. And then so if you're leveling up a spell, it's eventually, once it gets to level 3, occupies all of those Magicite slots. However, say you get like a 2 different eggs, 2 different colors. You can get like 2 different spells with like the level 1 version of the spell. So you can have like 3 spells in total queued up, but they're all the level 1 versions, right? So you can kind of have this like interesting diversity of things in your inventory, and then like, you know, you might want to utilize ones to get some further up. So if you're in first place, you might want to keep the barrier, you know, spell in your next slot, so you use that as soon as something starts coming in at you. Where when you're in last space, you know, you kind of want to just get that barrier out of your inventory as soon as possible to get like a different spell and things like that. So, and then in addition to those spells, you also have character-specific power-ups. And these are not balanced very well, the character-specific power-ups, I will say. But they do make it so each character has like their own unique gimmick, whether that be like a energy beam they shoot in front of them in some way that attacks everybody in front of them, makes an AoE effect around the player so they'll affect enemies around them, you know, shoot something backwards or make them speed up and things like that. So like every character has their own way they go around this. So like Shiva, like when you have Shiva, like she just basically has an ice like field around her while she's driving. So for like, you know, 3 to 5 seconds, you know, if anybody gets close to Shiva, they freeze and they have to fall behind, or if she gets close to them, you know, and it's like, it's pretty much track wide, honestly. So it's like not even just like she has to drive up to him. It's just like anyone within the perimeter, basically. And then you have like Cactar. He has a similar thing where like if anybody gets really close to him, he'll do like 1,000 needles attack and like knock them back kind of thing. And then you have like this one Chocobo, it's like a girl Chocobo, I forget her name, but she like sets up rings on the course, and that like if she drives through the ring, she gets like not only a speed boost but also invulnerability and things like that. But it's like things like that, you know, that ring one, it's interesting because other players can use those rings as far as I can tell. They don't get the full benefit that the girl does, but the other characters can still go through that ring, and it seems like it does boost their speed. But then there's other characters who kind of have a very similar speed boost effect, but it doesn't place the rings on the course, so like other characters can't get the benefit of that. So it's like a lot of weird like kind of trade-offs you have, and some of them are significantly worse than others. And then they also have like different speed boosts they'll do for characters. Some characters have a really aggressive spell, yet it also gives them like a big speed boost along with their using that spell, where other characters don't have that big speed boost with it. So they have an aggressive spell, but they just kind of stay where they are. And I feel like there's just at some point you kind of start narrowing down who has the best specials and you focus on them. They do have like different carts too, so you can kind of like adjust the stats depending on well, not really adjust the stats, but you know, you can choose between 3 different options. Really, it's a very Snowboard Kids kind of like speed or balance, speed, and power. No, sorry, balance, speed, and grip is what it is. So you can kind of choose a character who maybe is like more of a heavy style and then give them a cart that's more of a grip style. And so it makes them a little easier to play. I did that for a couple characters because I'm not really good at heavy characters in racing games, but it did make them a bit more manageable for me. And then it made some of the characters who might be more of like the beginner characters who are a lot more, you know, slower, but have a lot more control. It gave them more viability because you could increase their speed as well by putting them in a speed car kind of thing. So I thought it was like a really cool game overall. And I think that the customization, while not balanced very well, you know, you can kind of do whatever you want with it. And so it's not really a big deal. One thing I didn't mention as well is there's a warp spell in the game that I really like a lot. This is one of the items you get. And the warp spell is pretty cool because like you drop a warp down in front of you and it lets you basically jump ahead a little while, which is kind of neat, but it's more or less just like a different form of a mushroom, right? Which there is like a speed boost in this game already. But what's cool about it is it drops the portal down. Other players can use that portal, so they can also warp behind you. However, the exit portal is also placed somewhere. So when you warp to wherever you're going, the exit portal's placed behind you. So you can kind of like do some fun things with that, where you like put the exit portal like, or you time it so the exit portal like lands at like a bottleneck, so it's like kind of hard to dodge. But then you can also put the entrance portal in like a really inconvenient spot. So like what I would do is like if I got a portal, I would drive off the track and into like a fence basically. And you know, to me, like I'm losing a tiny bit of speed, but the second I'm putting that warp down, I'm warping off, right? So I'm out of that area. But then if somebody hits the exit portal, they get warped back to that really inconvenient location where they're just like stuck facing a fence in the grass kind of thing. So there's like some really cool things that you can do with it. And I just feel like those kind of options are not really things you see much in Mario Kart or something like that, right? Though I will say like the track design of this game is significantly worse than a Mario Kart game. The later tracks in the game are actually very cool. I like them a lot. But the early tracks in the game feel just too simple, and there's a lot of them, and they reuse them a lot too. When you're going through like there's like a story mode and a Grand Prix mode, and when you do go through the story mode, it is almost entirely made up of the short tracks, which is unfortunate. And then the Grand Prix mode, the first half of the Grand Prix mode, it mixes the short tracks in. It does start to mix in some of the longer tracks, like maybe towards the middle of the Grand Prix mode. There's like 12 cups basically in total. I think it's 4 races in each cup, I believe. So you spend a lot of time in this game on those kind of lesser tracks, and they reuse a lot of the same, like, tracks and then build upon them essentially. So some of the more complicated tracks are basically just expanded versions of the shorter tracks, or the other way you can look at it is shorter tracks are compressed down versions of some of the more complicated tracks, things like that. And so I just feel like it creates this imbalance of these like super short tracks that really kind of flood the initial part of the game, and those short tracks are not very interesting, unfortunately, where the later tracks are really interesting. And I understand why this happens kind of with these kind of games. I think this is like a typical thing that happens in these kind of kart racers, and it's just like restricting the amount of assets you have to create and getting the most mileage out of it. And I think there's always this feeling that we have to have like the baby tracks initially so the player gets used to the game, right? But I think what Mario Kart does well, and I don't know why or how it does this well, all those like baby tracks in Mario Kart still feel interesting to race on, even when you go back to them. And they feel like they make a small section of the catalog. So like Luigi's Raceway is still kind of fun, even though it's a simpler track. But like, this game, like, it feels like every course for a while is all just Luigi's Raceway kind of thing, slightly tweaked kind of thing. So I think the track design could be a lot better. The tracks are also, because they're short, it's still only 3 laps. A lot of the races only last anywhere between like 50 seconds to 2 minutes, which feels too short, especially when you're going through story mode. I haven't talked about story mode much. I'll go into it here in a second, but essentially when you're going through these cutscenes and stuff, you get spit out into a race, do a race for like 50 seconds, and then you go into a pretty lengthy cutscene again, which is, a problem specific to story mode. If you're playing online or you're playing in the Grand Prix, like whatever, you just get kicked off to the next race. Just means the Grand Prix itself is fairly short. But I feel like there's just too many short tracks in general with that. So the story mode is actually pretty fun though. It was pretty cute. It is kind of adolescent storytelling, but it has a lot of really deep cuts for Final Fantasy. I didn't know a lot of them, to be honest with you. I was kind of surprised. I was like, okay, this like joke they keep leaning on is very clearly a joke that's happening, and it's very clearly like referencing something in Final Fantasy VI. But like I have no idea what they're referencing, kind of thing. So it's been a very long time since I played Final Fantasy VI. So if you're like a big Final Fantasy fan that like really invests in those games and like you remember beat by beat what happens in them, you're probably gonna get a lot of that humor. I got less, so I had to do some like looking up, like, who is this? I don't remember who this is in reference to or why this is like a joke in this game, kind of thing. So very hardcore Final Fantasy sense of humor there. However, I think a lot of the delivery and stuff is very fun. Behemoth is like kind of this like delinquent, teenager. That's kind of a fun thing. And I think a lot of the delivery is very good with like the jokes. There is one joke that kind of like goes on a little too long, but it's kind of the point of the joke in some ways. But I think you have to be a very specific type of person to like those story segments, to be honest. And I personally really enjoyed them. But if you don't like that kind of like more kiddie storybook storytelling, I think you'll really be put off by it really quick, unfortunately. But I thought it was really fun. Thought it was a really good story mode. So anyways, I just rambled on a bunch. I might do like a casual review of Chocobo GP at some point. I'm not really 100% sure. I kind of been back and forth about it. And the reason why I've been back and forth about it is, so I played Chocobo GP and I was like, I really like this game. This is like, I don't think this is a great or amazing game, and it's nowhere near Mario Kart. This game does not replace Mario Kart 8, right? In my mind, I don't like Mario Kart as a series. So it doing enough like different little things is like fine for me. And I don't need it to be like some huge, expansive thing that lasts forever kind of thing, where like I didn't realize it recently, but like, or until recently, but like Mario Kart is like 8 is approaching like 10 years that it's going to be, the main Mario Kart. If you look at the downloadable content schedule they've laid out, it will be a very long-lasting Mario Kart game, and it's still selling, which is ridiculous. Anyways, so I really don't imagine Chocobo GP having that kind of legs. I personally find it to be a fun like weekend game. I played it Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and I'm gonna be honest with you, I think I'm pretty much done with the game, and I'm happy about that. I'm like, this is fine. This is like a good amount of game that I played. I played it like 8 to 12 hours, maybe a little longer than that, but like that is a good amount of game that I want out of a kart racer specifically, right? So I enjoyed that part of it. The thing that was kind of the weird thing though was before I played this game and like, around launch, I'm 3 weeks late to this because I just did like standard shipping with PlayAsia. Like there was a lot of beef about this game's battle pass, because there's a battle pass in this game, and it's like they're treating it kind of as a live game essentially. So you have if you don't know what a battle pass is, basically you pay a certain amount to get into this battle pass structure, and then when you do that battle pass, you like level up through it based off doing things like drifting a certain number of times and things like that. And this is all related to a specific mode called the Chocobo GP mode. It's like a tournament mode that you play online, which I really didn't play that much of. I didn't really like it that much, to be honest with you. I mean, it's fine. It's racing. It's still, and it's just like a different way you race and stuff. But like because the progression was tied to this battle pass, I personally didn't really have a lot of interest in it. Anyways, so when I like looked up videos for this game and like what I had generally heard about the game online was just like Chocobo GP is like a trash game. It's a disgrace to the series or whatever. And then so I'm playing this game, like, this is a fun game. Like, this is a fun, enjoyable game. I thought that it took me a while to get a hang of the handling, but, it was fun. And then so, like, looking at those YouTube thumbnails and be like, there's a complete disconnect from what this game is and what's being advertised on these thumbnails. Like, this is the trash, Square Enix trash or something like that, right? And eventually I kind of broke and I was like, let me watch these videos. I don't want to watch them. I hate like really reactionary thumbnails. You know me, I hate thumbnails in general for YouTube, but I watched them, and like at the end of the day, everyone in there seemed to more or less say, this is a good video game. It's just the battle pass aspect of it. And, and so it was kind of just like this weird moment of just like, I feel like the outward communication I've gotten about this game from people is that it's bad because of battle pass. But like when I played the game, like the content that's in the game itself, especially you're doing like the story mode, the Grand Prix mode, stuff like that, like feels like the amount I would expect playing for like a budget kart racer game. It is essentially the thing where it's like it's a $40 video game, but Square Enix adds like the $10 Square Enix tax on. If you weren't around during the DS era, like Square Enix always charged the maximum amount they could for a DS game, which was $40. So everybody would sell their game for $30, but Square Enix is like, nuh-uh, baby, we selling these for $40. It's like, all right. And that's just like an ongoing Square Enix thing. So I joke about it being the Square Enix tax thing. So like, in my mind, it's like it is a $40 game with the Square Enix tax like thrown on top of it. And I think the content that is the game is like perfectly good for that. I think it is a well-made game. I think the content in there is good. There's a lot of really interesting characters that you can unlock. And then you have this battle pass, and it looks like a really bad battle pass, I'll be honest with you. I didn't really see anything of interest in the battle pass. But you can unlock Cloud through there, and it also helps you unlock Squall. You technically don't have to spend money to unlock Squall, but that's a whole other thing. And so, yeah, and it's like, I don't know, it's just this battle pass is something that's in the game, and Square Enix very much like surface it to the players. Like the first thing they show you when you start the game, they like drop your cursor on Chocobo GP mode. They want you in there doing battle pass stuff, right? But if you just like go and do the normal stuff, like the battle pass doesn't really matter all that much. The only exception is you don't get Cloud and Squall, which I'll be honest with you, like personally, maybe I'm a weirdo Final Fantasy fan. I don't really want those mainline Final Fantasy characters anymore in these games. I'm kind of tired of them showing up in a bunch of games. I mentioned this about like back when Final Fantasy Explorers for the 3DS came out. I was like, I don't want these characters in this game. Like that, I don't need to see Squall again. I don't need to see Cloud again. I don't need these things. And so like the fact that like you can play as Terra's dad in this game instead of that is like way more exciting for me. I'm like, that's a weird pick. Terra's dad, or like playing as a Cactar and things like that. So I don't know. So I went through this whole like back and forth of just like, is this I don't know if I should be upset about this. I shouldn't be upset about this. And I think that's what bothers me is I felt upset about it despite knowing I shouldn't be upset about it. And when I say upset about this, I meant like the representation that this is a bad game, like on the surface level, right? It just feels like, news headline reading where you read a news headline and you don't read into the details of it. That's what it feels like scrolling through like YouTube thumbnails at times. And so like, who's at fault for that? Is it my fault for not watching the videos and getting the impression that these people just hate this video game? Or is it their fault for, presenting this thing where it's like literally their thumbnails, like them, like with a frown, with their thumb down kind of thing, saying like, Chocobo GP a disaster, ? And then you watch the video and like, this is a good game. Just maybe don't play, like, and then they spent like, maybe like, a chunk of the video talking about the battle pass and how egregious it is or whatever. And it's just like, I don't know where the problem is here. If it's a me problem, I think it's a me problem because I shouldn't be bothered and I should not care is what I'll say. At the end of the day, it stops with me, right? And I can live my life however I want. I don't need to care about what's being said on YouTube about video games. Like, that's the thing. And so like, that's part of why I don't like, and I think I've talked about this before, I don't like reactionary reactions to things. Like, I don't like people freaking out about Pokemon Sword and Shield and like being like, this is the worst game ever when it's very clearly not. And then I don't like that I react to that with like being upset that they're calling Pokemon Sword and Shield the worst game ever when it's very clearly not, kind of thing. And like, I feel like I'm no better than they are with that. Like, and it's just like, to some extent, it's probably just like human nature, right? But like, I think initially when I was thinking about doing a Chocobo GP video, I was like, do I make like a video that's just like, hey, you guys are overreacting to this battle pass thing? But at that point, I feel like I'm doing the exact same thing as they are, right? so I'm like, what do I do? So I think the real answer is that I just need to make, if I want to make a video about Chocobo GP and how much I like that game in certain ways, like, not that I love it, but like, I think it's like, it was a fun game. If I want to do that, I should just make a video about Chocobo GP itself and just do that and maybe talk about the battle pass a little bit. But don't focus on that kind of, the community reaction to this thing. Mainly just feel like, hey, there's a lot of stuff going around about this battle pass. Let me just say, like, what actually affects you. Because I feel like as a game, it doesn't affect Chocobo GP, like, at all. It is something that just optically Square Enix has shoved it up front, and people have reacted to it because it is the thing up front kind of thing, is how I feel about it, I think. So, either way, it's just one of those things that, like, I'm very self-critical of myself, and I don't blame anyone for reacting, like I said earlier, Square Enix is shoving this in your face, right? And so, like, people are reacting to that. That's not necessarily their fault. It's because this is being presented as the biggest thing in this game, when clearly it's not. It is, like, an option, like, it is an online mode you can do. You can just do normal online as well if you'd like, although I try to find a room and they're completely empty, so and I think unless I find just like other people who are willing to play with me, I don't think I'll ever really touch the online beyond playing a little bit of Chocobo GP. So the GP mode or whatever it's called. So anyways, long ramble about Chocobo GP. I feel like an asshole when I sit there and like judge people based off their reaction to things, because then I'm reacting to them and I shouldn't do that. I try to think about that stuff. So if you're like, Ben, you are an asshole, I'm trying to be self-reflective. I'm sorry. I'm trying to be better about it. And hopefully that makes, if I do a video, a better product at the end of that, where we're just talking about like, hey, here's why Chocobo GP is a cool video game. So when I do a video, I'm not committed to doing Chocobo GP video at this point. It would be something that I think would be nice to do, but I would not want to spend a lot of time on it, I think. And I think I would like to talk about the Battle Pass aspect in there, but it probably would be like a tacked on thing. And I would probably want to avoid a situation where I'm like directly attacking, like, this sentiment around it, kind of thing. The main reason I kind of laid out my entire thought process here is because I wanted you guys to kind of see how I got through that process in some way. I don't know if that's interesting or if it just sounds like rambling, but I said it and here we are. If you're here, if you haven't clicked out of the video, you listened or you skipped ahead, one or the other. So yeah. Speaking of Final Fantasy, I actually did watch Final Fantasy and the Legend of the Crystals this weekend. That was part of the stream, video or movie stream that we did, that Mr. T runs in our Discord. And I like that a lot. If you didn't know, this is a Final Fantasy OVA that is actually like a sequel to Final Fantasy V. And I watched it as a kid and I did not have a great memory of it, to be honest with you. But it basically is like 200-ish years after Final Fantasy V, and it's a very Final Fantasy story. There's 4 crystals. There's like this kind of like, I don't know if alien race is what they would be called, but they come in, steal the crystals, and then you have kind of this like magician girl, or I think she's a summoner specifically, and she goes and like has to like protect the wind crystal, and she has this kind of like snob-nosed kid who's like kind of the warrior of the group who's traveling with her. But it's just like kind of fun. It's very like 90s OVA kind of style. And it's just kind of a goofy, fun little thing. And it's kind of weird that it is connected to Final Fantasy V. It doesn't have any real bearing on anything that happens in Final Fantasy V, but it's still kind of fun that it goes through there. There is some stuff in there. And I remembered this from when I was a kid, and like thinking as a kid, that it was kind of weird. Like when the girl gets like the wind crystal like embedded into her, like flies into her at some point. And then like, I don't remember exactly why this happens. It's more of just like a joke or a gag thing. But like when the crystal's within her and like something's about to happen with the crystal, like her butt cheeks will start to glow kind of thing. And so they just use that as like a point of humor kind of thing at times. So I think some people, because she is a kid, and there's like a lot of times where like everybody's just like staring at her butt kind of thing. I think there are some people that have a lot of problems with that, and I definitely understand that. And there is like some other kind of weird horniness to it. There's this guy who is like very infatuated with this pirate leader who is basically wearing like bondage gear kind of thing with like a whip. If you've seen like, what's her name? And why am I specific? I guess I'm just going to talk about a Battle Arena Toshinden character all of a sudden. There's like a lady in there that has like a thunder thing. She goes like thundering. She very much looks like that, but she has like red hair kind of thing. And like at some point she gets like a cut, and it's like on her chest, like across her boob a little bit. And the guy who is like in love with her, it like zooms in super close on her boob, and it's just like, oh, how dare they? But like while they do that, the lady is like, has this most like, I don't know what you would call it, smug look while she's staring at him. It's a really weird scene. It just looks really strange. It's just kind of strange in that way. But anyways, I thought it was like fun overall. I really like the main character. I think his name is Pritz or something like that. It's kind of weird. I think it's Pretz or something like that. But he's just kind of like that kind of like hot-headed kid that I like, and he's got like I don't know. He has a lot of fun in the combat. Like he's very lighthearted about the combat, and I love the grenades in the show because they're like little clamshell grenades. Because like basically they have like this shell on the outside, and then inside there's like a little yellow ball that has like a face on it, and they like stick their tongue out before they explode or something. So like he's like in the pirate ship, like threatening them to like do stuff for him so he doesn't blow them up. And he's just like sitting there like clacking them together, like with the faces like poking out. He's like kind of clacking the grenades together in there. And then like, he drops it at some point, and then it's a whole thing. So it's just kind of a fun OVA. It's a shame that it's only available on VHS still, as far as I can tell. So there's no way to get it like in the modern sense. There is like a YouTube upload. It's pretty poor quality on YouTube. But I think there are other uploads you can find that are probably of higher quality. So anyways, that was a fun little thing. I'm glad I watched it. I thought about getting copies of it maybe because I did like it a lot, and I typically, if I like a show or something like that, I typically will get a physical copy. But it being VHS would mean if I want to actually utilize it rather than just like have it around, at that point I would need to get a VHS, or VCR, which would not, given my nightmarish like old hardware setup, would not be a problem. That would be an easy ad, and I don't know what the VCR market looks like, but it would be like a weirdly specific thing to get a VCR for, unless I really got down some like weird hole where like I could find a reason to like try to archive something, and then I could very much like justify a VHS player. I'm like, I'm just gonna just like import a bunch of VHSs from Japan. Although I'd worry because like Las Vegas, the heat here is so much that like I would worry it would damage the tapes and things like that. So I remember when my dad was younger, he left a bunch of like, cassette tapes in his car, and it just heated up a ton, and it ended up like messing up the actual like tape inside. And so he like lost his entire music collection back in the day. So That was not fun, I guess. I don't know. I was not cognizant of what was happening at the time. I just remember that being something that happened. I don't know anything about how he actually felt back then. Or when it happened, honestly. Maybe it was time to move on. Get a fucking MP3 player, Dad. I don't know. This is a long time ago. So that was fun. And I think, so the other thing I want to talk about, and this is like a follow-up to last week's podcast, is Sparkling Feather. So I did play Sparkling Feather a bit. If you don't know, with Sparkling Feather, I'm trying to get the good ending of that game, but I don't know how to get the good ending. So I went through and watched the Japanese playthrough, which unfortunately is not complete, but it does get the good ending. And I went and basically, first I tried to get the good ending again on my own, and once I realized I clearly was not on that path, I was like, okay, what do I need to do? So I went back and looked at this footage. I watched the entire playthrough. I didn't watch the entire playthrough, but I went to the key points of the playthrough and took as like a bunch of notes of like who's involved in this scene, who's important in this scene, at what point are they important, things like that. And so what I'm hoping to do with that is to be able to go back and build specific relationships with these specific characters at particular times. And I think part of this, maybe, I don't know any of this for sure, but I think part of this is these characters, when you have these conversations with them between missions, there might be specific questions you have to ask to initiate certain chapters to happen later. I think this is something that happens. So what I'm thinking is, I've already done this to some degree, I have not started it yet, but I've identified those particular missions, when they happened in the story for that other person, and what characters to focus on, up until that point. And I have to do a little bit of testing, but there are different sound cues when you answer questions, or rather you ask questions of these other people that you're on a date with, essentially. And there's 3 different sound cues. A clearly bad sound cue that's like, oh, you answered poorly. There's a more general sound cue, which I think is like your relationship has increased kind of thing. And then there is a more sound cue. And I don't know if that means your relationship has double increased, or maybe you have asked a particular question that has advanced something, right? Because there is a character that I messed around with this a little bit, because I kind of was starting to put the pieces together a little bit in my main playthrough, what might be going on here. And there is a character that I went on a date with, and when I asked her the questions, when I was using machine translation, which this game is terrible with machine translation, because all the text boxes are transparent and it's a nightmare. But one of the things asked about her relationship with another character. And so the chapter that happened after I asked that question seemed to be about her and another character. So maybe there's a particular question that needs to be asked that cues the start of a chapter cutscene that happens. And I think it always has to come back to this character's relationship with somebody on the enemy side, because there's different factions. Basically, there's the Continental Feathers, what they're called, and you are Earth-based stones, so you're ruby, sapphire, diamond, things like that. And then I believe there's the I forget if it's called the ocean or if it's called the coral feathers, but they're water-based things. I forget what they are, but water-based stones and things like that. So I think these characters have relationship with characters on the enemy side or whatever, and so maybe you have to dive into that dialogue aspect with that character to advance the plot. And then I went through and kind of detailed what missions appeared in my playthrough, on my first playthrough when I got the bad ending, and what missions did not appear in mine. And honestly, I think you're missing probably, if you miss every single optional mission, I think you miss 50% of the game, actually. Which is kind of crazy, because I think it ends on chapter 14, and if you get every mission, which I think you need to do for the good ending, it ends on chapter 23 or something like that. So it's a pretty hefty chunk of game. So I'm gonna give it one last shot. I have not determined when I'm gonna start doing that yet. Because I did kind of I spent a bunch of time hammering my head against it, testing different theories and things like that. And I just want to take a break and just enjoy a video game. So I went and played Chocobo GP, and then I went into that whole mental anguish about battle passes and how it like affected the conversation around that game, because I can't just enjoy video games anymore apparently. But I did really like Chocobo GP though. But anyways, so yeah, I think I have an idea of what I want to do next. I just have to sit there and do it. I did have some people ask me recently, because I was kind of detailing what I had to do, and they're like, is it a good game? Is Sparkling Feather a good game? The answer is probably no. They're like, why spend your time on this? Like, I gotta know. I've spent so much time on this. I feel like I just gotta know at this point. Cause I can do the English guide video for Sparkling Feather right now, no problem. But if I can tell you how to get to the good ending, I think that's way more important. Is it more important? I don't know. I think it's important, maybe. I would like to be able to tell you. It's important to me. So, because I feel like that once you do that, then we can have like an understanding of what that game is as a whole, and then be able to play that game from start to finish. Worst case scenario though, if I can't figure it out, I can say, hey, I couldn't figure it out. I think this is what's happening. If you really, really care and you don't want to go through the nightmare that I did trying to continue my quote research about this video game, then you can just go watch the video that does the playthrough and just see what happens story-wise there. So anyways, so Sparkling Feather was kind of a nightmarish thing for me. I feel like this podcast has gone on very long already. Let's get into the Patreon question here real quick. Hey, Patreon time. So if you don't know Patreon, we have that. You get bonus content. This week we have the unfinished review for Jumping Flash coming out. So I just, didn't edit it or anything. I just basically dumped, the audio into a video editor, and then dumped a bunch of footage on top of it, and then just exported it out. I don't really want to finish the Jumping Flash video, so it's just going to stay that way. It was a casual review, so it's not a huge deal either way. And you can definitely tell when I abandoned it, because it was like from that time where I used to be like, hello everyone, at the beginning of every casual review kind of thing, like a podcast in some way. But yeah, so that is going up on the Patreon this week. At the $5 level, you get any of that kind of bonus content. However, if you don't want to do the $5 level, there's like a $3 support level you can do. But in that support level, you do get the option to ask a Patreon question. So for this week, we do have a Patreon question that was submitted by Jillian. Jillian's one of the Patreon supporters. We also have Paul Daniel and someone listed as Discreet as well. I believe that is because they are like anonymous, not because they're actually named Discreet, but I can say that every week forever probably. But Jillian's question was, what are my favorite side quests in games? Or like, what was one of my favorite side quests, basically? This is a really hard question, because like actually remembering good side quests is kind of a hard thing to do. And in some ways, this kind of feels like cheating, because the last story has really good side quests, because they basically are made at the same production level as the main story quests in a lot of ways. So these side quests, optional quests, they don't really feel like side quests. They feel like main story quests, but they're still really good. The two I picked in particular was because there's some interesting ideas that they have. One was the haunted house, which essentially is a quest where you go into this haunted house, and it is like kind of a mansion. You go from room to room, and like your party members start to disappear as you go through the mansion, which is kind of a fun thing. And then at the end of it, you kind of go through this whole, series of spooky based encounters kind of thing, and then you eventually find the culprit of this ghost that's in the mansion, and then all the doors in the mansion open up, and you get to chase this ghost through this mansion and shoot like a silver arrow at him so you can start dealing damage. And so it's like a really cool mission that like is like kind of fulfills that kind of haunted house filler episode in an anime or something like that, but has a really cool gameplay mechanic around it, because it is like you kind of getting dragged from room to room, and different like kind of gimmicks happening in each room, and your party members slowly being siphoned away from you as you go through that, and then eventually being able to kind of bring everyone back together again, and then fight the final boss, and like have this fun encounter where you're chasing him through the mansion and like trying to shoot him with this arrow so he becomes invulnerable. It's just like a really specific set of events that happen, and a lot of the effort was put into this quest that you can miss in that game, unfortunately. So very cool side mission in there. Another one I appreciate that's maybe not as like mechanically interesting, but I like the concept of, is chapter 21, which is the Flamin' Lizard. And essentially the Flame and Lizard is about you going to like a bar to basically get rid of this, I think it's like a cult leader or something. It's been a while since I played the last story. But you go into the bar, and so the mission starts in the first floor of the bar, and then eventually you kind of go up to the top level, you go into different rooms in the bar, and then like some of the bar doors are locked, so you have to like go out of the window and like shimmy across the window seal to get into the other rooms, and then you go back into the main area of the bar, and like other things are happening. So it's like this like one area that is actually really confined, but this entire side mission happens, and like a ton of events and a ton of fights and stuff happen and throughout this one bar you're in. And I think that's like a really cool thing. I like games that make like really smart uses of space, and the more and more they can combine it down without it just feeling like, you know, being cheap or something. Like if they utilize the space in really smart ways, I think that's like way more impressive to me, honestly, than any open world game that has a ton of space just for the sake of having space. So I'm always more impressed by like smaller games that feel either bigger or feel like they do a really good job utilizing all the space that they have. So there is my answer to the Patreon question. So thank you again. If you want to ask a Patreon question, once you've become a Patreon member, you can go to the post that goes up on every Monday, where I essentially just go there and list out what the question will be without an additional question being suggested. And then once you suggest your question, then I'll pick that up for the podcast next week. And if I can't for any reason, I'll let you know. I'll respond to it. But for the most part, I can't imagine too many where I couldn't offer an answer to you, you know, within a week at the very least. So, but as long as you submit it before like Friday, that's usually like when I start thinking about the podcast for the week. Then that will be fine. So. Anyways, Patreon corner over. Like I said, not many news stories this week. A couple of things I do want to talk about, though, is Rhythm Thief. There was a fanzine that's coming out in December. So if you are interested in participating in that fanzine, I believe the submissions for it are still open. If you want to, I think they're doing like stories and art stuff, but look at the details specifically. But it's just a fan Rhythm Thief community thing. There is no like physical copy as far as I can tell, so it's not like the Near Gestalt book or something like that. The one that's like, I forget what it's called, Someone Special or something like that is maybe the Near Gestalt book. I don't remember exactly, but you know, it's not like one of those. So it is just a PDF they're distributing later. But still, if you're a fan of Rhythm Thief and you're a fan of those kind of like fan made things around Rhythm Thief, that's very cool. Link will be in the description if you want to find the tweet about it that I found. A couple of other things I want to talk about. So that's really the only news story I had, honestly, that I want to talk about this week. There's a couple of other things I kind of wanted to touch on real quick. Even though this podcast is going long, I made a list of things just in case the podcast was like too short. But now that I have too much stuff, I'm just going to kind of rush through these. I recently was like looking into Atoka stuff on Yahoo Auctions, and I found a set of documents that would seem to be like a Atoka conversion kit. I bid on the documents, but unfortunately it did not work out. The like last hour, a bunch of people bid it up, which is perfectly fine. I just wanted to, like, if nobody was going to get them, I was like, okay, I'll scan and archive them onto archive.org, but I wasn't going to like sit there and fight for it. It was like $30 for them. I think the end bid was like $90, and that's probably way higher than I'm willing to spend, honestly. It would have been nice to be able to scan them into archive.org, but I'm not going to die over it, right? Anyways, so I was looking at that, and I kind of found out that there's this game called Dragon Collection that came out, and apparently you could convert your Atoka machine or your Dragon Collection machine into an Atoka one. So if you don't know anything about Atoka, there's actually two different machine types that they have. One that's more like, it looks a lot more better produced. It has like a hard shell cat on top, like cat like structure. It prints out holographic cards and things like that, and it is kind of the official Atoka machine per se in some ways. But then you have the ones that have like a very thin stand on them, and then they have like this like kind of carpet that you can lay over top of it that's like in the shape like it's a cat, and so like goes over this like metal cube and makes this like cat like overlay that happens or that gets applied to it. But what I found out is apparently those Dragon Collection machines were those original systems that have those kind of metal stands on them, and they just put the cat overlay onto it. So I thought it was kind of like a neat little piece of information. If you don't know what Dragon Collection is, don't worry, I didn't know either. And apparently it's like some mobile game that's fairly popular. I think you can still play it today, actually. But there's an arcade machine as well, and it looks like that they use the kind of Eureka Battle Atokadol hardware for that game, essentially. I don't think it was developed by, that version of the game was developed by the Atokadol Eureka Battle development team, or if it was more of a, I think a straight, like, kind of, like, it doesn't seem like a game that was, like, built around their design etiquette, I guess you could say. It doesn't really feel like one of their games from what I saw. So I don't know if they actually worked on the software or not, but it is on that same hardware. So that's kind of a fun little thing. I also recently found a solution for compressing down at least my 480p video games. There's a tool called Handbrake, and you can basically use that to compress videos down. And it's a significantly big improvement, because I had maybe 130 gigabytes of Happy Dance Collection footage, and I was able to bring it down to 83 gigabytes of Happy Dance Collection footage. So, and I really there is a very, very, very slightly noticeable drop in quality, but when you're uploading to YouTube and things like that, barely anything. For saving 100 or 800 gigabytes alone is I think well worth it, especially now that I've already done a Happy Dance Collection video. Any use cases I need for Happy Dance Collection footage is going to be very secondary at this point. So being able to narrow it down to just 83 gigabytes was very nice. Just 83 gigabytes in quotes, I do try to keep them at 1080p and stuff like that, just because it's easier to work with in that regard. But yeah, so that was kind of a cool thing. I haven't worked on it with 240p or 240 or 480i games yet, or with 1080 stuff. I definitely would like to compress down a lot of my PlayStation 4 footage. I don't know, I just basically capture everything at really high quality, basically. So I think there's always space to improve on compressing it down. But because I jump between so many different systems, I don't sit there and tweak my settings all the time, because it's just I don't know, I could be recording Indiana Jones and the Infernal Machine, then jumping to Chocobo GP, within less than a week or something like that. And I don't want to sit there and tweak my capture settings every single time I'm changing what I'm capturing, kind of thing. So that was a nice option for that. And then right now the PC98 GA stuff is still on hold. I did have to import or at least I was told by the PC98 Discord community that I'm in, that I need to import a 3-mode floppy drive for my current PC. So I basically can write stuff to a floppy drive, and basically, put stuff on my actual PC98 through a more traditional installation. I do have a flash cart on there that I can take out and put in a flash card reader kind of thing, which again, thank you for the people who donated to the coffee that helped me get that back when I did that. And so, but I don't know anything about that stuff, but it seems installing through the floppy drive installs stuff more properly rather than just dropping files on there, right? Actually installing the executable. So I'm not really any further in that process, but I am basically waiting to receive that package. I consolidated my Baiyi stuff recently, so probably sometime early this week I'll get the option to actually ship it, and then it might be 2 to 3 weeks before it gets here or something like that from there. So hopefully, we'll see. Shipping internationally is kind of a weird thing still. So yeah. And that's pretty much it. Thanks again for coming. OneControlPort.com is the website. If you didn't see earlier last week, I did go ahead and put up my Nintendoji video. So if you haven't checked that out, I would recommend doing so. Again, would super appreciate it if you share it in any kind of communities you have. Thankfully, Nintendo Life, I did submit it to Nintendo Life, and they actually picked it up. So it got 700-ish views from there. How many people actually watched it's kind of another thing. But I was really happy to see them pick it up. Didn't really make it around to many other news sites. I did look at some of the other sites that posted it again, but it seems like they were more news scraping sites. So they would scrape Nintendoji's content and repost it, which is not great. Or Nintendo Life's content, sorry. So they scraped that. So really Nintendo Life seems to be the main people who actually picked it up. I did submit it to a few other websites. I also put it to the 3DS's Reddit, but none of those seem to be super responsive. Somebody on Reddit actually downvoted me because they were like, "You obtained this game illegally." I'm like, all right, well, like, what do you want me to do? Like I said in the video, like, I think the only chance you can get Nintendoji at this point is by, randomly importing 3DSs and crossing your fingers, or like going and looking through like the softwares of what's already installed on a 3DS, which I think from a Nintendo's perspective, honestly, they would probably be like, no, you can't use somebody else's user account or user downloaded software. You need to wipe that system. It probably violates their term of service, to be honest with you. So, yeah, I'm not too worried about that. I'm gripping my shoulder really hard for some reason. I don't know why. There's nothing going on with my shoulders, just gripping it now. Anyways, so so thank you to Nintendo Life. Again, if you can share any more from there, I'd be super thankful. The traffic died off super hard once Nintendo Life finished it, so it's been floating around like 750 for the last like 48 hours. So not a lot of traction with it since then, but hopefully it's one of those videos that over time will gain some traction. Sometimes I put those videos out like the Nier video, and then like it takes a year for anybody to even start noticing it, or like for the YouTube algorithm to find the right people for it or something, right? So yeah. Otherwise though, in terms of upcoming content, we're going to be doing the stream for Crime Crackers soon. So hopefully that will be kind of a cool thing. I'm going to be kind of using some of the techniques I use to play Japanese games on that stream, hopefully. So if you've been curious about like how much suffering I go through with that stuff, like with Sparkling Feather, that might be these streams that I'm doing with Japanese games might be a good option for you to see that. Hopefully it's entertaining, and hopefully it's not boring. I'm always happy to have feedback. So if you're like watching it and like, this is a terrible stream, I just wish you would play video games, definitely let me know. So yeah. And then in terms of like real content coming up, I might do that Chocobo GP review. I'm undecided on that. And then I'm looking at some of the other stuff. There's a lot of things I worked on late last year that didn't get to the finish line, unfortunately. So I'm trying to see what I can use from that and put out. I still think there's a lot of value in maybe doing some GameCube stuff. We actually talked about it on stream last week because I played Kududen Squash after Pac-Man World a bit. And Kududen Squash is an amazing GameCube game. Unfortunately, there's not a ton of like coverage of it out there, so it would be a good game I think to do something on, whether that's like a review or like a list that includes it or something like that. That's a whole other thing, but I did build out like a GameCube list late last year that I was putting together, so I think there's still value in maybe doing that, or at least taking pieces of it and utilizing it in some way or the other. So anyways, that's it though. Thank you again for coming. OneControlPort.com is the website, and I hope you have a great week. Bye.